This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
Welcome to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I'm your host, Sarah Blair, and with me today I have John Kenneth Muir. Welcome back, John.
Hello, Sarah. Thank you for welcoming me back, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to chat with you today. I know we are practically neighbors. I'm in Atlanta and you're over in North Carolina, so we're not too far away.
That's right. We can find the truth out there somewhere between those two states, right?
Exactly. Well, today we're going to be chatting about Too Shy, and this episode originally aired November 3rd, 1995, and this is the 6th episode of Season 3, and it was written by Jeffrey Vlaming and directed by David Nutter. So, you ready to dig in and chat about this episode? I'm excited.
Me too. I love Too Shy. I think it's a great episode. I think it's very underrated and typical for the X-Files. It's not just scary, but there's a lot of sort of subtext and meaning beneath the sort of horror aspects.
Absolutely. All right, let's dig in. In this particular X-File, Mulder and Scully hunt down a fat-sucking vampire who uses the internet to seduce and capture his victims. So, out of 10, John, what would you score this episode? 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest.
I don't want people to always think that I give easy grades, but for me, this is like a 10. And, I have a hard time like really picking out a bad episode of the X-Files. There aren't many. So for me, though, it's like, why would I give it such a high score? And, we can talk about that. But for me, this is a high scoring episode.
All right. So what's your number?
I'm going to go with 10.
Really?
I am. I'm going to do it.
All right.
And I'm going to explain why when we get to it.
Okay. All right. So, excellent. Okay. Well, I think I would give it like a 7, a solid 7. I think the directing saves it. And I think I would have given it a lot higher in the past, probably an 8 or a 9. But going back to watch it, I haven't watched it in about 2 years since the last, I did the big rewatch for season 10. So that was almost, 2 years ago now, exactly. So that's been about how long since I had watched it, and then before I rewatched it for our discussion. So I think I liked it just a little bit less this time around. But I'm excited to talk to you about it. And the people on IMDb gave it a score of 7.7, and that's out of about 2,334 votes. So let's get to it and talk about the episode in further detail. So the show opens and we've got 2 people on a date, and a man and a woman, things are going well, and then they don't go so well. So how do you think the show opens? Yeah, what do you think about that scene?
Well, it's perfect for the X-Files because, of course, you have to start with the opening mystery, right?
Right.
And in this case, you want to grab attention. Of course, you want to be scary. You want to do something surprising and a little bit different. And I think if you go back in the X-Files, I think maybe we've seen a couple scenes a little bit like this. What was it in maybe in Gender Bender we saw, but it didn't end up exactly like that because the whole fat sucking issue wasn't involved.
Exactly.
But I think it's a pretty effective way to start the episode because, of course, you want to ask what's going on, what is the mystery we're looking at this week, and anytime you can have a little sex, a little horror, I think that's going to get people intrigued.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite things about this particular scene is the girl's wearing a clover necklace that her sister gave her for the good luck, and it breaks. And I thought that was nice symbolism to, set that up where her good luck breaks. And guess what? She is not going to last but a few more seconds. So then we have a cop come and he finds her body, and I like the directing in this particular bit. I think it's good and mysterious and very X-Files-y.
Right.
Sticks with the brand there, where all we see is the necklace and a bunch of flesh-colored goop, and it's just gross and horrifying.
Right. It's off to the races. I always think of these as like the pre-title sequence of a Bond movie. It's going to be
yeah.
It's the thing that draws you in. That's going to keep your interest for the next whatever it is 45 minutes.
Exactly.
And I think it's cleverly done and very sharp. And I think the great thing about this and Too Shy is I think that when I mentioned Gender Bender and some other stories, there's the idea here of that maybe this isn't like that fresh of a story, but then the deeper you go into it and meet the characters, because I know this is frequently compared to maybe some of the Tombs stories or things like that. You've got another monster of the week who needs something biologically from his victims. That all seems like, okay, we're going to be treading over familiar territory here. But then as you go into the episode and you look at like what the subtext is and you connect it to how Scully is treated by the detective working the case, and you start to like get like, okay, this might be familiar in its setup, but it's not going to be familiar in terms of its context and how it impacts the characters. And, Encanto is no, like Tombs and ripoff or knockoff. So, it starts at this very basic level, like a horror level, but I do think it gets deeper.
Right. And I definitely am excited to talk to you about the detective Cross and Scully dynamic in this. So let's talk about that, because we've got in the next scene after the credits, we meet Detective Cross, and he's played by James Handy, and he does a really good job playing his character, I think, as this kind of a misogynistic old school dare I say dick. But come on, let's be honest, that's what he is.
Totally.
And so, like, he comes up to Mulder, and he completely ignores Scully. And he's like, I'm Detective Cross, I'm here. And Mulder's like, yeah. And he, like, greets him, and then he introduces Scully to him. And it's very, old school, like, let's introduce the little woman here, all that. So
I think he's great. And, again, you want to be careful how you say this, but the way you said he's a dick, I mean, that's exactly... That is what he is, but what we're really getting at here is this idea of a boys' club,
right?
And you go back and look at some of the genetic foundation, so to speak, of the X-Files, and you talk about Silence of the Lambs, which we know was an inspiration. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember that film, but remember how Jodie Foster's character was treated by the other law enforcement officials. It's very much this old boys club. A confident, competent, professional woman is looked at sometimes, I don't want to say down your nose, but at least askant. I mean, and that's clearly the case here.
Right.
With this character, and the things he says is, I'm not being sexist. It's just the way it is. Yeah. No, he's being sexist because that's the prevailing dynamic of this group. And I love that even in 1995, the X-Files was pointing this out, that, Scully does not walk in and be treated as an equal here. And that's vitally important to the sort of tapestry of Too Shy, because what we're talking about here is a culture that treats women as less than, it treats women as others, and we see that in the way Encanto treats his victims and lures his victims, and we see it even on the side of the good guys and the law enforcement, that Scully is not considered equal.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that this sort of slipped down the numbers in my view, because that made me so mad being a woman. But I do appreciate that they sort of brought light to it, and it wasn't just the way it was. And, I really appreciated the scathing looks that Scully would give Cross, here and there. Like, you can catch them, and I'm just like, yes, Scully, glare at him, be so mad. She's, righteous in her fury. So, I really appreciated that they didn't sort of gloss over it, but they sort of acknowledged it instead of letting it slip by as that's just the way it is. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think there was an episode of Millennium that also covered this territory where Frank's partner also met a sort of misogynistic police officer, and it was pointed out. So, I love that if you look across the body of Chris Carter's, work on TV, you do see it ingrained there, that it's as much as we're lauding law enforcement for what it can do, it's not perfect. There's this old boys club. There's this, good old boys mentality sometimes. And that, characters like Scully, or I'm trying to remember what episode that was of Millennium. It was an early first season episode. The character there, they have to not only deal with what are we looking at, what is this case, but how are my peers treating me, and looking at me for what I can do. This guy Cross doesn't even think Scully should be doing an autopsy. It's
right. Yeah.
This is what
you're a medical doctor.
Right, exactly. This is what she was trained to do. This is what she went to school to do. She's excellent. She's, the top of her field. And here's this guy saying, where I come from, you shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. It's
It's infuriating, right?
It is. It's absolutely infuriating. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get. I want to talk about that scene in depth for sure. So, we've got Mulder and Scully meeting all that, and they're introduced and everything, and then we realize that the killer, we still don't actually know his name yet. He's interrupted from this little online chat that he's got going on. We realize that he's sort of, pulling his victims from online now, even though Mulder and Scully just said that he was finding them in the local newspapers and ads. So he's finding these lonely women and trying to seduce them and pull his victims from there. So he gets interrupted by his neighbor, and I don't think we actually know her name's never really said on the show, I don't think, but I looked it up online as Monica.
Oh, okay.
So, I was like, what is her name? Because her daughter calls her mom, and nobody ever says her actual name on the show. So, she, this scene made me laugh really loud. Being a writer, I'm sure did you? She goes, she's sort of trying to flirt with him and not doing a very good job at it. And she asks him, if he's in the publishing world, if he's a writer or editor, and he's sort of like to blow her off, he's like, shouldn't you be off writing? Like, if you're a writer, shouldn't you be off writing? And that cracked me up because, right. She should be. She's a writer. We all should be writers, That's everything.
Exactly.
So I definitely appreciated that moment from, being a writer myself, and I know you do probably too.
Yes, and on the rewatch for me, it's so interesting because when I wrote X-Files FAQ, I guess that was leading up to the return of the show in 2016, and that was when I watched Too Shy, and then I watched it again in anticipation, of this podcast, and what I thought I was going to be saying was sort of the theme of this episode was like how dangerous and scary and anonymous, you can't trust internet predators, that this was like at the beginning of the internet predator era, in the mid 1990s, things like that, presaging, catfishing and things like that. But then when I watched it in anticipation of this podcast, I was, oh my gosh, that's not the story at all. And the scene you're talking about is a little bit a piece of that. What this is really about, I mean, how we can look at it now is, after all of these allegations of harassment and abuse that we've seen, like in journalism, in entertainment, in sports, everywhere, broadcasting, you look at like people who are in power and like try to use their power to control people, and that's, the name Encanto means to sing. It's very interesting how he's depicted as how he uses his words to manipulate people and to get what he wants from people, and how people come into his loop and are unsure of him and like almost hand him the power. Are you in publishing? Are you, can you help me?
Right.
And he's in a position where you think, and this is what's interesting with Cross, how you compare the two of them is like Cross is like a blunt instrument. It's like, it's not sexist. It's true. He doesn't make any bones about what he is.
Right.
He's like right in your face. Like, he's not an ally. Right. But in Encanto, the way he talks to his victims, the fact that he's in publishing, it's like this guy in power who's like going to lure you in like a spider, and then suck your fat out. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wrote. I was like, he lures them into his little web. And that the thing that I think is so, so, so creepy about Encanto is he knows exactly what he's doing. He's had so much practice. It's like, 38 victims, I think?
Right.
Something like that. And so he's got this down to a T. He knows exactly what he's doing. When he's chatting on the computer and you see his facial expressions, he's like, yep, I know this. This is old, he's so rehearsed and he knows exactly what to say. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how to nail him down, that kind of thing. He's so manipulative.
Yes.
And they just like fall right into it. And the whole time I was watching, I was like, no, don't fall for it. He's creepy. You can't just stop. Don't do it, But
Absolutely.
he's got the victims that are so desperate for somebody to want them.
Right.
And he, like he says, not to jump ahead too far, but at the end, he's like, I give them what they want. And so, it's gross. It's gross in so many ways and on so many levels. It's just gross. It
is. And, and I think that's what Tombs is gross and disgusting too. But what I think, what differentiates Encanto from Tombs is because they're both obviously working on some sort of biological imperative or need, but the way that Encanto does it, this manipulative, come into my parlor, said the spider, like you said, so rehearsed, so prepared, and he does it. I mean, he does it with his intellect, with his words, with promises to be not like. It's like the promise to be an ally. It's like he tries to make them feel good about themselves, but he's really just pulling them in. He's acting like, he's a nice guy. He knows exactly what words to say. He knows how. He knows what they're feeling like when they're thinking, should I do this? Is this really a stranger? I mean, one of the victims who says it's
Grand Canyon University, an affordable private Christian university, is one of the largest and fastest growing universities in the country, offering more than 270 programs online. In addition to federal grants and aid, GCU's online students received nearly $130 million in institutional scholarships in 2022. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu/myoffer to see the scholarships you may qualify for.
Not like he's a stranger, he's got this gift, this Encanto, this singing, his typing, his words that pull people in and they're disarmed. And that makes him like a real psychological manipulator in a way that like Tombs is not. Right. I think that's differentiates him. If you're looking at monster of the week, mutant, they need something that's missing so that they can survive. What makes Encanto different is the intellectual gamesmanship.
Right.
Is that so much of this so many of the tools he uses aren't like the tools of his body, of his mutation. It's not like he's going to stretch through the vent shaft and grab you, you know, or stretch out of the jail cell and escape. It's not that. It's that he plays you psychologically. He knows how to play his victims, and to me, that is just like deep and really terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, Toombs is a predator in the natural sense, where he's got a need and he goes after his victims, you know, like a lion or whatever, and he just does what he needs to do to get what his body needs. And Encanto is just a predator in every sense of the word. He plays games, you know, he knows exactly what he's doing, and he just really messes around with his victims. He's like a cat that just toys with the mouse before he eats it, you know? And it's,
absolutely.
I think that makes it so much worse, I guess, in a way, because it's just, you know, completely just nasty and horrible.
It seems, I mean, I know that what Toombs does is hunting, and in that sense it is premeditated, but what Encanto does seems much more premeditated and planned. It is like he's like that spider, and like saying, you know, step forward, come into the web, come a little closer, he's inviting them closer and closer until he can take them. And to me, there's just this, you know, intellectual, psychological, whatever you want to call it, aspect to that, you know, which fits in perfectly with him being a writer and everything else, and, you know, sort of being able to wield this power over, you know, people who want to be writers and things like that. It's just very interesting to me.
Absolutely. All right, so our next scene, we've got the confrontation with Cross and Scully in the that we sort of alluded to before, where he comes in and he goes, "Oh, I didn't know you were observing the autopsy too." And Scully is all badass, and she's like, "Well, I'm not observing, I am performing the autopsy, sir." And so, you know, he does his mansplaining thing, and he's like, well, you know, yeah. And so one thing that really irritated me about this scene is where, you know, he's like, he says, let's see, he doesn't think that women should be investigating cases where women are murdered or something along those lines because it's too personal. But the FBI at this point is like 90% men, and I know that all of the victims that they investigate are not women. So how does that, you know, line up with his thinking, like, in any way whatsoever? Because, absolutely. I mean, how are men not going to take it personal, but women take it personal? I mean, that's not fair at all. So that made me ragey.
Well, I mean, it's a double standard, and it's a stereotype that's wrong. I mean, because a stereotype is a failure to to see people as individuals, right? It's also like discrimination. It's prejudice. It's a prejudice against women. It's all these things coming into play where you're saying, oh, women – I mean, what he's really saying, let's just be frank. What he's saying is that women are too emotional to investigate cases like this. Yeah. Right? That's really the underlying message he's putting out. He doesn't think women can be capable and professional in the face of seeing, women killed. What he's saying is you're too emotional to do this. And I mean, that is like a stupid old stereotype, but of course you're surprised how many people believe nonsense like that. I know. And again, this is part of the reason why I rate the episode so highly is I think it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that these two stories, they mirror each other. Right. That we have Scully dealing with this guy, with Cross, this detective, who, I mean, let's face it, he's demeaning her. He's demeaning her gender, right? He's pushing all of his stuff on her. And then that is mirrored with what Encanto is doing, where he is he's pushing on these women, his agenda. He's using their agenda to get what he wants. And it's just an interesting mirror of those two stories. It's not a coincidence that they're both here. They relate to each other. And I think, I don't want to jump the gun and get to the final scene, but, Scully is quite rightly horrified by what Encanto does, and she's disgusted by him and by his treatment of women. And she's just undergone some of that treatment herself. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I love a good, scary X-Files. That's what X-Files is about. But the thing that makes X-Files truly brilliant is what it says about our society, what it says about who we are as a people, when it delves into this subtext. And you can see by this mirroring of like plot A and plot B that they're actually connected, that this is an episode about how our society treats women and devalues women. And to me, it's very powerfully done. And this scene with Cross and Scully, I mean, that's, crucially important because, what he's saying, I mean, which is ridiculous, what we know of Scully is, that she can't do her job because she's a woman, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what he's saying. And of course, we know that's absolutely wrong. I mean, we know in general that it's wrong to believe that, but we also know Scully, and it's like, are you kidding me? Right?
Yeah, right.
If anything, let's face it, if anything, who is the more emotional, less dispassionate partner between Mulder and Scully?
Exactly.
Right? Who might need that talk? Right?
For real.
It's not based on gender stereotypes, folks. Right?
Yeah.
I say sometimes it's like Scully is the more rational, analytical. All those things. Of course, she can do an autopsy, without a jaundiced eye or without being emotional. That's what she was trained to do. That's what she's expert at. So I love that scene. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I do appreciate about Chris Carter. I don't appreciate his cliffhangers so much, but I do appreciate that he did fight for Gillian Anderson when, the networks were saying, oh, we need somebody sexy for Scully. She's got to be the hot one and this and that. And he fought for her to be a complete woman. And, she is beautiful, but she's also incredibly smart and sharp. And she goes great against, like you said, Mulder's passionate nature and all that. And I really love that he sort of flipped those, no other word for it, but stereotypes and tropes. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, that's one of the things I do appreciate about the X-Files as a whole, and as Chris Carter, who, fought for that and really, set that up to be a success, because I don't think it would have been as good if it had been swapped. So, yeah,
I agree. Good. And when I write about the X-Files or horror movies or anything like that, I'm always looking at like, what was the context? What was happening in the culture at the time that made this look the way it did? Like, why? And I know that Chris Carter would say this, with the writers, said like, why tell this story now? And I think it would have been, I don't want to say dishonest, but I think it would have not reflected the culture that we're in, and to some extent are still in, as we've seen from the whole movement, Me Too, and all the women who have been harassed and such by men in a position of power. It would have been dishonest, or at least unrealistic, to just always have Mulder and Scully go somewhere, and for Scully to be accepted without question. Mm-hmm. In those circles, in those law enforcement circles, because we know that wouldn't have reflected reality. So not only did Chris Carter think to sort of flip the stereotypes, which was brilliant, but then he actually, in specific episodes, you see what that means. You see what Scully has to face. She has an impediment sometimes that Mulder does not. I mean, I guess Mulder's is that people think he's crazy. He's spooky Mulder. He walks in and then you say, "Oh, is it Bigfoot?" That kind of thing. But there's a Loch Ness monster. Crazy stuff like that. But Scully's is that she isn't always taken seriously by this, patriarchal law enforcement circle that she's in. So it's very interesting. Not only that he knew to reverse it, to reverse the stereotypes, but that he also knew, and his writers knew, to like make it realistic to the context and say, look, she's not always going to walk into a room and be accepted by other male detectives. By male detectives. Right. So very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So after Cross sort of decides that Scully is not worth his time, I guess. I don't know. He just, like, he's there to watch the autopsy, and then he just walks out. So, I mean, I don't know what that, I guess he is just like, well, I guess, I'm not going to be here for this. So he left, and surprise, Scully opens the drawer to begin the autopsy, and she sees body juice. So the body of Lauren McElvey has completely decomposed into nothing but a bunch of slop, which is disgusting and awesomely X-Files.
Right.
While she's trying to figure that out, Mulder's over interviewing the, well, let's just be honest, she's pretty hot. Lauren McElvey's best friend. And she said that Lauren was hanging out in the chat room called Big and Beautiful. And that was interesting because, like, one of the things that really bugs me about this episode is, like we've already discussed, Encanto preys on the minds of these women, which I think is why he chooses them as victims, rather than, if he was just feeding this need for adipose tissue, he would just go and get it wherever he could get it. Man, woman, whatever. Like, even, I don't know, like seal blubber, like, would that work for him? I don't know. Like, could you not just go find a nice, like, move to Alaska and go find a nice chubby seal and eat that? Like, I mean, if you really needed to.
Right.
that was your sole need to feed. But no, like you said, he really gets off on preying on the minds of these women. So I guess that's why he chooses them. But I mean, to me, none of these women were overly, large in any way whatsoever. I think they were pretty normal.
Right.
And that's another thing, that, like, the body image issues they had and all that, and how, on the internet, even probably today a little bit, maybe less so, but, like, men are afraid most of, like, well, not all men, obviously, but it's like they don't want to meet a girl that they think is not good looking online or whatever. That's what they're afraid of. And in the meantime, you've got Ellen having this chat with, her friend, and she's like, this guy could be a serial killer. Like, women are terrified of meeting a serial killer who will actually murder them. And guys are like, well, what if she's not hot? Like, yeah. So there's that dynamic that I found really interesting, and how that played out through the whole episode with, her friend was like, please don't do this. This guy could actually murder you. Like, and even online culture back then that's something that you needed to be afraid of back then. And even today still, obviously, it's possible to, meet a serial killer online. But I think as we've sort of, evolved in the internet, and it's become so prevalent in our lives with Twitter and Facebook and all the things, meeting someone online is not quite as terrifying as it used to be. It's sort of become more of the norm than the exception.
Well, we've gone into the stage. Catfishing does occur.
Yes.
And I know, unfortunately, I know somebody in my life who went through that, and really, it really damaged him as a person. There's still this idea of, we don't know always who we're encountering on the internet. But I think you're very right about everything you just said, about, first of all, that the women, they don't seem that big, right? Mm-hmm. And so what are we talking about here? Again, this is how the episode all fits together. We're talking about standards of beauty as imposed from where, and from what kind of society, and who sits at the perch at the top of that society. Who decides what is beautiful? Who decides what is big and beautiful? Where is that imagery coming from? Those standards of beauty, they're coming from, again, from media, from broadcasting, from publishing, from all these places, right? Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not trying to sound strident, but who's in charge?
Right.
Who was in charge in 1995? Who is largely in charge now? It's men, right? It's white men. Sorry, please forgive me, everybody.
But it's just true. It's just what it is. Yeah.
It's true. So what are they saying? You're a couple pounds too heavy, and what? you're not worthy anymore. I mean, because big and beautiful sounds like it's trying to be nice, but is it really? Or is it saying to a certain group of men who may be on the internet, don't look here because you're not going to see what you like?
Or,
right?
Or
on the opposite.
The opposite too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's just really interesting to me how this whole episode kind of ties into, you talk about conspiracies in the X-Files, you talk about, what's the syndicate, you talk about how are things organized, you want to talk about like a real life conspiracy.
Right.
It's that there's a demographic that controls standards of beauty and acceptance, and has for a long time. And if you don't fit those standards, you are an outsider. And if you're an outsider, maybe you feel less worthy about yourself. I mean, you can apply this to this is what I love about the X-Files. You can apply this story today to any group of outsiders. I mean, and the X-Files, it wasn't just this episode where it picked on, let's say, women with low self-esteem who were a few pounds heavy. You can talk about episodes where they talked about the immigrant experience. Was it El Mundo Giro in the fourth season? Right. They were looking at that, like who is in and who is out, and why are they in and why are they out, and who made them in and out?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's what I love about this episode. I think it really starts to talk about these kind of things in regards to Scully and Cross, in regards to Encanto, but the women have low self-esteem. You ask them, but you have to ask yourself, why do they have low self-esteem? Who made them feel bad? Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really made me feel so sad for these women, is because they have already been through this so many times. They both say that, like, I've done this before, I've been hurt before, I have problems with trusting people because of these experiences. And he just takes complete advantage of that.
Right.
It's horrible.
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, to me, this episode is a tragedy. And the woman who plays Ellen Kaminsky, she just breaks my heart. That character.
Yes.
The actress's name is Catherine Pallone.
Yes.
I think. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
I think so.
But she, of course, you look at Timothy Carhart and how effective he is as the Spider, right? But you look at Catherine Pallone and the performance she does. To me, it's just that she delivers. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking because she's obviously a person who is so loving and kind, and all she wants is to be loved.
Yeah.
And it's just terrible. I mean, there's nothing wrong with her.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong with her.
Great girl, and here she is, like, being mistreated by all these dudes, and it's not fair at all.
Right. Yeah, I understand why you said you were infuriated. It's infuriating, and it's tragic. It's like, don't believe these standards that somebody has imposed on you, that then lead you into this.
Yeah. And imagine, like, how is she going to react? I mean, she survives this, and then what is she going to go on with the rest of her life? How is she going to even date anybody again after this? Like, how is she going to ever, like, she had trust issues before, and now she can't even trust herself because, she mentions that to her friend, like, I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I think this guy is legit, and sure enough, he's absolutely not. He tries to murder her. So how is that going to affect her? Like, she's going to have so much therapy, that poor woman. Right.
It's horrible. Me, that's what, I think there's often, you often really do feel sympathy for the victims who survive in the various X-Files. But for me, it's the sympathy, it's just kind of haunting, and that's why I think the Coda scene is so important with Scully facing Encanto down for all, sort of for all of his victims. You know what I mean? So to me, it's just like, this one is haunting, and it's not just that it's infuriating, but that it's really tragic too. It's just really tragic.
Right. Yeah. So after that talk with her friend, she stands him up for their date, and he gets desperate and has to go pick up a sex worker. And he doesn't have to. He chooses to. So he kills her, and before he can consume all of her fatty tissue, one of her other sex worker friends comes up with a date, and they encounter him, and he runs off, and foiled again. Oh no, he does not get what he needs. So he's only increasing in his desperation. And I did appreciate the John who was like, forget this. He's like took off running like as fast as he could. He's like, I'm not going to get into this business. So, that kind of made me laugh a little bit. But, yeah, so after that, we've got, the detectives who find the body, and we've got Cross and Mulder and Scully. And speaking of scathing looks, he goes, she wasn't most John's first pick, if you know what I mean. And Scully looks at him like she could melt him down to his fatty tissue and suck him right up. Like, I mean, I was really proud for Gillian Anderson for that look. That made me really happy. So,
and again, what this discusses. You're talking about, what's the underneath, what's the subtext here? Mm-hmm. The subtext is pretty clearly, women are here for us to enjoy, to look at. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? Yep. Isn't that this? Right? That's why you're here, put on this earth, right?
Exactly.
That is, you're here to be pleasing to us, to our eyes. That is what is being said there.
Yep.
And again, it ties in to like all this other material we get in the episode. So, I don't want to belabor it, but boom, there it is,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yep, yeah. Right there. Yeah, true to his character, Detective Cross lays it right out. So,
absolutely.
Then we get Mulder. He puts together the academic angle from the obscure quotes of Italian love poems. He figures out that this guy has access to, either some kind of academia or he's some kind of, whatever. And then Scully also has a profound, observation where she finds the skin under Holly's fingernails and decides that, this guy didn't get away unscathed and he's going to have a wound. So we need to look for that too. So now we've got our clues and we know that we're looking for some guy who's close to academia and he's got a wound somewhere on him from these fingernails. So then we cut to Encanto, who meets the neighbors in the hallway, and Jessie is the daughter of I guess she's the landlady. I never could actually figure that out because she, at the the first scene when she brings by Encanto's key, she says, the landlord made new copies for the basement or whatever. Here's your copy.
Right.
But then later on, Scully says that she's the landlady, so I don't know if she's maybe the building manager. She's just not the owner. That was never clear, and it kind of irritated me because, I was like, if she's gonna get killed, at least make that clear. Like, give her some kind of dignity or some kind of But let's just not brush her off completely here. So but her daughter Jessie is blind, and she's got Encanto's number, and he's freaked out by her, I think, because I think he knows that she knows there's something up with him. So I really like Jessie as a character. I think she's does
smart.
Yeah,
smart.
yeah. She's very she's got it down. She's got his number, and she's played by Aloka McLean, who did a great job there. So yeah, I really liked her. I like that she's scared of him, but she's not so scared that she's not smart and isn't able to do the right thing,
Yes,
she doesn't let that fear overwhelm her.
Right, she's appropriately scared.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Exactly. She listens to the part of herself that says, be scared of this guy.
Right.
And that's smart. That's smart.
Exactly. So then we've got Mulder and Scully talking about the skin analysis from under Holly's nails, and Mulder says, I liked his line that he gave her. He goes, it's not yet the finely tuned madness you've come to expect from me. This is just a theory. And I love that little smile that Scully gives him. She's like, you're cute, Mulder. But yeah. And so they come up with the fat-sucking vampire theory in this scene. And so now they know what they're looking for, and they've got everything narrowed down. They've got all their clues ready to narrow in on this guy and get him taken out. So I really liked this cut. I think it was a good choice from Nutter, or the editor who decided this. So we get Encanto, and he is talking to Ellen about trying to reel her back in, and there's the knock on the door. And he gets up, and you've got the next cut goes to the door opening, and you see Scully, and you're like, oh no, Scully's gonna get, but then it's not him. She's at some other house. So
right.
And somebody else. And then you cut back, and you see that it's Cross going to interview Encanto.
The thing that I thought was so fascinating about this, again, is that, I love to look at like antecedents and what are the inspirations for the X-Files, and there was a cut just like that in Silence of the Lambs when Clarice went to you think she's going to go to the other house, but she went to Buffalo. It's the cut at the door, like, and it's like two different doors, but the viewer is not aware they're two different doors.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I think, okay, again, it makes perfect sense because if you're looking at this thing, which we also saw in Silence of the Lambs, which is how women are treated in law enforcement, to me that was like almost a editing homage to Silence of the Lambs, because they did like the same cut in a story that had that same touch about the good old boys network and law enforcement. So I don't know. I noticed that. I thought, oh my gosh, there's like
well spotted
little references here.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So excellent. So this is where we start like getting into like the really intense stuff, which I really like how the climax sort of escalated at this point. So we've got Encanto and Ellen finally going on their date. He gets her to drive him home by lying about his car and saying that he's like, oh, well, I've got to take the bus, but it's okay, like, please, dude, we totally know what you're doing here. Poor Ellen, however, wants to just be nice. And that's the thing about women, like, we just want to be nice. We just want to get along with everybody, and it really sucks when men take advantage of that. It's not fair at all. So,
absolutely.
And then we find out what a complete and utter creeper he is.
And what do you think? I just gotta ask you, Sarah. But do you sometimes when I look at this episode, I'm looking at these scenes, and you're talking about how he's an academic. Do you ever think that there's some aspect of this episode is about like somebody who was like abused by a professor? Because we know that happens. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That like that was the seed for this story. Some guy, some a-hole who used his power. He used the power differential like in a relationship with somebody who was just like, I don't know, in a class trying to write, do something like that. But to me, that's like if you cut out all the stuff like the adipose, the fat-sucking vampire, that's what this is like really about. It's like some guy who had power over somebody and he knew it and he used it and he leveraged it, and what you were just saying about like how women want to be nice and the way he sort of winds his way, about taking them. But, it's like he's so manipulative.
Yeah.
He's so manipulative.
Yeah. And he knows and he knows it. Like he's doing it on purpose.
Right.
It's not just a thing where he's like doing this by accident in any way whatsoever. He knows exactly what they want and he knows exactly how to get it, and that's that's one of the most nasty things about this, and it makes him so completely evil. It's just horrible. So
it is.
Yeah. It's
not a feel good episode.
absolutely not.
It's definitely not one of the more funny, lighthearted ones. Even if it's it's not like that. Right.
Exactly. So if you're coming for this episode for some laughs, you're going to be disappointed.
That's right.
Right. So we've got him out in the car with Ellen at this point, and then he's all like schmoozing her and trying to get her to go inside to his apartment with him, where he's already got a dead body waiting. I mean, let's be honest. Is he going to like just try to seduce? Like, I don't know. He's desperate, obviously, but... Yeah, so then we cut to inside where the neighbor, Monica, is coming to drop off the poems where she said that she's going to drop them off. But obviously they don't fit under the door, of course, because,
Right.
So she's got a whole bunch of keys, which makes me think that she is the landlord, but I don't know. Like, she just lets herself into his apartment. And then she goes, this annoyed me, she goes to set up the package... like on the floor up against his bookcase. Like what? Like just, I mean, if you're in the apartment already, just put it on his desk. Why put it in the place where she decided? I don't know the reasoning for that. I couldn't figure that out, and it annoyed me.
See, for me, again, picks up on this thing, this power differential. It's like it's like she's subconsciously or whatever, it's like she has to please him, she has to do this right because he's a little edgy, he doesn't really express his emotions, sometimes he's not nice to her, sometimes he is nicer to her, and it's like she goes in there, which she shouldn't be doing, she's like, and she's like, should I put it here? Should I put it here? What's he gonna like? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot more sense the way you put it. Yeah.
I don't know. That was just my thinking about how this is all like a creepy mind trip to to control these victims and how he's leveraging his power over them. So it's like you walk in like, should I put it here or should I put?
Like she's afraid of imposing on him by putting it on his desk, or
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm going to put it in your space, but not your special space, like your desk. It's like,
not your special writer space. That's sacred.
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Okay, so he's now out. We come back to the cars. Like, I like the quick cuts and the short scenes here. It really amps up the tension, I think. And we've got him all, bow chicka wow wow with Ellen outside, and then all of a sudden the light comes on in his apartment. He's like, nope, shuts it down right there. Yep. And because she's like, well, I don't know. And he's all like, yeah, come on inside, lady. I'm going to treat you right. And then she's like, I don't know. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Let me go. I'm just out of here. See you later. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
it's amazing how he can drop his pretense of interest. Isn't it?
Yep. So he runs off and he gets inside. And then the neighbor just decides to explore his apartment to find a little bit more about this guy. And guess what she finds in the tub?
Right. Body.
Grossness. So I really appreciated that she did the silent scream where she's just like so freaked out, because that's what I would have done. I would not scream out loud when I saw that in the apartment. I would have lost my mind and just it's like when you have those nightmares where you're screaming but you can't scream. It's like that, I think. That's what happened to her, poor lady. And then she gets done in. So poor Monica. And then we've got Jessie next, who comes looking for her mom, and she knows. I think she knows exactly what happened to her mom, and she trips over the suitcase, and Kanja's like, I'm leaving for New York, like totally, smooth, and he thinks he's being smooth, but Jessie's got his number. So she thankfully gets out of there. She smoozes him back, just like he tried to, Like, that's what I love about Jessie, is, like, she's kind of his counterpart. Like, she's able to manipulate him just as much as he's able to manipulate her. So.
It's really interesting that the characters are so unalike, but again, that they are a little bit of mirrors for each other, because they're, she's got what's going on with her as far as her vision, right? But she can really see, right? And he, what's going on with him? He's got this crazy deficiency, but somehow he can see and manipulate. He can see into the souls of these women that he's victimizing and manipulate them. Right? Isn't that right? There's sort of something going on there, right? There's some level of insight that each of those characters has that isn't like readily available to everybody else.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So then Jessie calls the police and gets them in there, and Scully, I think that scene where Scully and Jessie are talking is probably my favorite scene in the whole episode, because they're like, Jessie knows that her mom is gone and she's trying to hold it together. I mean, she's got, as far as we know, she's got nobody now. She's just this little girl.
Right.
Who can't see. She needs her mom to take, to help her. Yes. Like, she's very capable, but at the same time, when you're that age, how capable can you be? Like, with all of your faculties intact. That's like a huge tragedy right there. And then
absolutely,
Scully sees, like, her emotion and compassion for this little girl was just, brilliantly played. So I think that was probably my favorite scene between them.
Right. And it speaks to the permanence of what he has done. And again, you said tragic, and that's like exactly the word I think of. And when I said this is not a light or happy episode, I mean, her mother is gone. That's this little girl. It's not like she goes on the next week and has another adventure and she's okay. You know what I mean? Her life has been, ripped apart by this guy.
And she warned her mother. She's like, I don't like this guy. Like, parents, listen to your children. Children are intuitive and they know what's going on. When they tell you to be cautious around somebody, believe them, trust them, their intuition, So, yeah, So, not to be a judgy mom, but just saying.
I'll be a judgy dad with you and say, I agree.
There you go. All right.
Kids can see people for who they are.
Exactly. I totally believe that. So now we've got Mulder and Scully. They have a description of Encanto. I'm not totally sure where they got it, but they have it. And they get his computer, and I love the 90s technology here. He's like, he reformatted his hard drive and all these, technology words from the 90s. Oh, bless. So he's like, it's going to take some time to figure out the password and all of that, because that's a thing that they could do then. And so now we've got Encanto going to Ellen's apartment, which I really want to know how he got her address. Because she dropped him off at his place. Just saying. I don't know.
I didn't pick up on that. That's good. Nuts and bolts kind of like, hey, wait a minute, how did this actually happen?
Yeah, yeah. So I was definitely wondering about that. I don't know. I mean, obviously, like, he's a master manipulator. Like, maybe in between something, like, but she's surprised that he shows up. So I know that he didn't call asking for it. But this is the 90s, and, things, you can find stuff out, I guess. I don't know, maybe he looked up her license plate or something.
Yeah, I don't know. That's I don't know if that would even cross my mind.
He's got a buddy down at the DMV and had him look it up, or who knows what. But he's there, which is the important part. And he's out in the hall, and he's trying to get his way into her apartment. She's got the chain on. I was proud of her for that. And she's like, I just don't know about the way we left things. I don't really trust you. And then he's like, the key that he says to get inside is, let's not do it out here. And, he's like, let's not have this discussion out in the hall. Let's just let me in and we'll talk about it. And he like zeroes in on her fear that, what are the neighbors going to think? I've got to give this guy what he wants so he doesn't make a scene. And she's worried about everybody else except herself.
Right.
And that's such a woman thing, just, like, not to stereotype women, but.
No, Sarah, that's it. It ties back to what you said before, where you're thinking about, like, am I being nice? Am I right? Mm-hmm. It's like you think about what is everybody going to think?
Yeah. It's late.
Yes,
I'm going to wake people up. I don't want to wake anybody up. I don't want to, make him mad. I've got to give this guy what he wants so that we don't make a scene. And he literally
thrives.
says that. Yeah.
He thrives on that kind of thinking. That's the kind of thinking that gets him in the door, literally.
Right, exactly. So, he's like, that's what he's threatening her with, is making a scene. Like, if she doesn't let it, all she has to do is shut that door and lock it.
Right.
And that's it. And she's safe. But she's so scared that he's going to make a scene. I mean, at this point, she's not, she is scared that he might hurt her, I guess. But, she doesn't want it to escalate. So instead of just not letting it escalate by locking her door, she lets it not escalate by letting him in. Which is
terrible.
Right? Yes, exactly. But, I mean, I can't say that I blame her, because I don't know what a choice I would make in that situation.
Absolutely.
And you've got this guy, it's like, what are you going to do? So, yeah. So then we've got Mulder and Scully going to this list, and, they're like checking down this list of all these people on his computer, and they get down to 2 people, Ellen and some other girl. she leaves a message on the answering machine. And Ellen goes, and she's real smart. She goes back into her room and she emails her friend. So at least she knows that the guy is in the house with her. So we've got Ellen and Scully in the apartment. Mulder is there with Scully, which is great, but then he feels like there's somebody out there and he chases them down. So he's gone. So it's just Ellen and Scully and Encanto in the apartment. But we don't know Encanto's in there. We think he's gone. So I really appreciated Mark Snow's score in these scenes. I think, most of the time during the rest of the episode, he sort of like created the atmosphere and everything, but the score really stood out to me in the chase scenes and this climax scene. So what did you think about that?
Yeah, I love it that through the episode, it's sort of like a slow burn kind of score. It doesn't draw attention to itself, but it contributes to, like you said, to this sort of atmosphere of dread. And then it like sort of comes to life, and I loved it.
So then we've got Mulder, who turns out he's chasing down a graffiti artist. Don't shoot me. So yeah, he gets out there and he is gone, and then Scully goes to help Ellen. She finds her in the bathroom with the goop already on her face, but she's not dead. So thank goodness for that. She gets like the nail clippers and gets her out of that situation. And then what happens? But she leaves her gun on the floor to go to the bathroom to get some help for Ellen, and that kind of made me mad because I know Scully knows better than that. But, you
have to have some plot contrivances, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, I know, like, as a medical doctor, I love how they always say medical doctor. I know as a medical doctor, Scully was probably more focused on taking care of her patient than the law enforcement side of her. But, yeah. So that's probably the explanation for that. That's what I'm going to say. Anyway.
Good. I'll go with that one.
Yeah. And she's also distracted talking to 911, so there's that too. But while she's in there looking for stuff to help Ellen, Encanto jumps out of the shower and attacks her. And she gets him with the nail scissors, and then Ellen shoots him. And I really, really appreciate, after all we've been through in this episode, that the two women are the ones who took down the dude.
That is the way it had to be.
Exactly.
Mulder couldn't have done this one. Wouldn't have been right.
Nope. So
it had to be Scully and it had to be Ellen. He had it coming, but it had to be from the women. It had to be.
Exactly. And that look on Ellen's face at the end where she's like so fierce, it made me really happy, and it made me know that even though she's been through this trauma, she's going to be okay. Like, she's strong enough to handle this situation, and she might be traumatized a little bit for it, but I think she's going to survive and thrive in the rest of her life, I hope. So, yeah. I
hope so, too, because she didn't deserve it. And I mean, none of them did.
No.
But, it's just horrible.
Yeah. So, our last scene, we've got Encanto in jail. He's looking pretty rough with his condition. And he confesses to all the murders, and then Scully asks him Jesse's question, why would you do this? Mm-hmm. And he says he's just feeding a hunger, but Scully, calls him out on it, and she says, you preyed upon their minds as well, and that's really disgusting to her. I think Scully, Gillian Anderson plays that really well, that part where she's just like so horrified and appropriately disgusted by this creature that she's encountering. And Mulder's just like, Mulder gets what he wants and he's ready to head out, and Scully's like, no, we're not done here.
Right.
And so he says that he gives them what they wanted, which is not to be murdered, by the way.
Right.
I mean,
really. Yeah, thank you so much for deigning to let me have your attention before killing me. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And like you said before about Toombs, he needs this stuff to, he needs the livers to stay alive, and Encanto says he needs this fat to survive or whatever, but no, he doesn't. And Scully, I really appreciate that she calls him out on it, and she says, not anymore. It's like, yes. But maybe one thing I really wish that we would have swapped those two lines where he says the dead are no longer lonely. Like, he's a total creeper, and that's how the episode ends. But he gets the last word, and that made me so mad.
Oh,
like,
I didn't think of that. Yeah.
Because there's no reason that, he couldn't have said that. And then you could have just put that line up there, and then, he has the line about giving them what they want or whatever. And then Scully could end it with not anymore and walk out, drop the mic.
You're right. Maybe a little re-editing there could have given us that drop the mic moment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't think of that, but you're right. But, I do think, though, in some sense, if you want to look at Encanto as this, not just, literally he's this monster, but metaphorically he's like a societal monster. It's the way we treat women. It's like that monster is this one might be captured, but he's not dead. You know what I mean? He's that monster is still out there. You can't, if you gave Scully the final word, that would be awesome. But on the other hand, you can't suggest that by catching this one guy, it's resolved.
There's just another one out there. Yeah, who's next?
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. I get that.
And his excuses too. I mean, and I don't want to name call. I don't want to call out anybody, but it's like you look at their excuses for doing it, for harassing people and behaving badly. That to me, it's like Encanto's moments like that. It's like, well, I was giving them what they want, or I had to do this. It's like, well, it was a different time. It was the 70s, baby. It's like,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It still doesn't mean you get to treat people like crap.
Exactly.
Or, in this case, murder them.
Right, exactly.
Murdering is just not okay. Let's just leave, it's not okay to kill people. Let's just not do that.
It's not okay to go after people.
Right.
It's not okay to make people feel vulnerable and then kill them. Right.
Exactly. Separately, neither one of those is okay. Put them together is super not okay.
Right. There's no way you're going to justify that.
Exactly.
This is just the way I am. I needed to do it. Well, there were a lot of things you could have done. You could have gone to the hospital and said,
right, gone to some doctor.
Right?
I mean,
could you go to the doctor and say, there's something wrong with me? Help me. Look at what's happening to me.
Why is my skin like this? Like, people go to the I've got psoriasis. I go to the dermatologist. I don't go and suck fat out of people to cure myself.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's because he picked what he has and exercises and rigorously covets what he refuses to give to others, which is control.
Yep.
Right? It's control. That's it. That's what it comes
down to. Yep.
He liked having the power.
Yep.
He liked having the power and the control over the other people to solve his problem.
Well, John, I have to say, I really appreciate your thoughts on this episode. I'm so glad that we could talk about this. And I think, as typically happens, I've sort of, in talking with you and everything, I can definitely see how you would give this episode a 10. I don't think I could go quite that high. Probably, it's definitely moved back up a little in my esteem. It's definitely not one that I would miss on a rewatch. So.
And Sarah, I want to say the same for you. You had some great insights there that really just increased my understanding and knowledge of the episode. And you also picked some things that I think, okay, God, I didn't even think of that. And then maybe I need to put mine down to like a 9.5. Like, oh, how did they find him there? How did he find that apart? I was so taken with the sort of overall metaphor of it and how it all fit together with Cross and. To me, that's the reason to watch this. I was to see what Scully's dealing with is like what these women are dealing with, and look at Encanto. For me, I just love that. But again, you just had wonderful insights that I think increased my understanding of Too Shy very much, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I think that's the beauty of doing this podcast, and it's one of the biggest reasons I enjoy doing it, is hearing other people's opinions and being able to see things in a different way, and hearing how other people's experiences affect the episode and how they see it and all that. And even, as my own life experiences grow and evolve over time, going back to revisit episodes and things like that, it's a lot of fun and all that. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to do this podcast with all these different people. It's great.
Well, me too. And Sarah, thank you so much for having me on to discuss this great episode with you. And I agree. It's like, to me, the X-Files will live forever as long as we keep talking about it and what we see in it, and isn't it amazing that you can do a rewatch and another rewatch and you go back and you still see something new and something that was created 25 years ago.
I know, it's crazy.
Isn't that
right? It's
isn't that just amazing? It just shows what artistry is involved.
Indeed. Well, thanks for joining us today. Where can we find your books? And tell me just a little bit about your books and where we can find you online.
Absolutely. I write film and TV reference books. My last book so far is The X-Files FAQ. That was from Applause Theater and Cinema Books, came out in 2015, part of their FAQ series. I also wrote Horror Films FAQ for that series. I've written a lot about film directors and horror movies, and you can find all my books. Do a search on John Kenneth Muir on Amazon, and I blog pretty much daily, although I've dropped doing Sundays because I'm too busy, sadly. And I'm at Reflections on Film and Television at blogspot.com. But if you just look up John Kenneth Muir's blog, that's the best way to find it.
Awesome.
So, thank you.
And are you on Twitter? We can find you there.
I am on. Yes. Thank you, Sarah. I'm at JK Muir. And I'm on Facebook at John Kenneth Muir, and most of my, I think I just do everything public on there.
Yep.
So, please, I'd love for people to find me and continue the discussion.
Awesome. Well, once again, I'm Sarah Blair, and you can find me online on my website, Sarah L. Blair, SarahLBlair.com, and I'm also on Twitter at Sarah L. Blair. And we appreciate you joining us today. Just remember, till next time, trust no one.
The X-Cast, an X-Files podcast, is produced and presented by Tony Black, alongside a dedicated group of podcasters and X-Files fans. You can find us on Twitter at The X-Cast, and on Facebook if you type in The X-Cast, or at our group, X-Files Basement, an X-Cast podcast fan group, where you can continue the discussion about all things Mulder and Scully. If you want to support the X-Cast further, you can now subscribe and become a patron of the show on Patreon. On Google, just type patreon.com/The X-Cast. That's Patreon. You'll see all of our tiers, subscription options and perks, which include early access to episodes, bonus content such as commentaries on X-Files episodes, access to a patron chat zone, and even appearing on one of our patron roundtable discussions. We would appreciate any support you can give the show, so just go to patreon.com/The X-Cast to find out more. Our title music is provided courtesy of Will A, who you can find on Twitter at IamWillAYE.